Captain James Anderson stood on the deck of the USS Valor, his eyes fixed on the turbulent horizon. The sea churned beneath the mighty vessel, mirroring the storm of emotions in his heart. In the quietude of his cramped cabin, James penned what he feared might be his final letter home. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote, pouring his love, fears, and hopes onto the paper. "My dearest Sarah," he began, the words flowing from his pen like a lifeline to his family. "The weight of this mission bears down on me, but thoughts of you and our children keep me anchored." Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in their suburban home in Virginia, Sarah Anderson juggled the demands of motherhood and the gnawing worry for her husband's safety. She tucked 5-year-old Ethan into bed, his innocent question hanging in the air, "When's Daddy coming home?" Sarah forced a smile, hiding the uncertainty that plagued her. "Soon, sweetie. Daddy's being brave for all of us." Later that night, as 3-year-old Emma slept peacefully, Sarah sat alone in the living room, surrounded by photo albums. She traced James's face in their wedding picture, willing him to return safely. The ticking clock seemed to mock her solitude, each second stretching into an eternity of waiting. On the Valor, James retreated to his memories. He recalled Ethan's first steps, Emma's contagious laughter, and the quiet moments with Sarah that had sustained their love through deployments and distance. These recollections were both a comfort and a torment, reminding him of all he stood to lose. As dawn broke over two vastly different worlds, Sarah and James were united in their love and their fear. Sarah steeled herself for another day of brave faces and reassurances, while James prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their hearts, though separated by oceans, beat as one, full of hope, love, and the silent prayer for a safe return. Years passed, frozen in time, forever young and full of life. On a crisp autumn evening, Sarah found herself sitting on the porch, a familiar ache in her chest as she watched Ethan, now 15, toss a football in the yard. His lanky frame and determined expression were painful reminders of James. Inside, 13-year-old Emma sat at the piano, her fingers dancing over the keys in a melody that James once loved. "Mom," Ethan's voice broke through her reverie. "Tell me about Dad's last mission again." Sarah's heart clenched. She had told the story so many times, each retelling a bittersweet mix of pride and pain. "Your father was a hero, Ethan. He saved many lives that day." As she recounted the tale, Emma joined them, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The children listened intently, hungry for any connection to the father they barely remembered. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Sarah stood in front of James's dress uniform, displayed in a glass case in the study. Her fingers traced the medals, silent testaments to his bravery. The folded flag, presented to her at his funeral, lay nearby, a constant reminder of the price of service. The following day brought news that Sarah had dreaded, but always known might come. 2 officers in dress uniforms stood at her door, their faces solemn. "Mrs. Anderson, we regret to inform you." The words washed over her like a tidal wave, confirming what her heart had feared for years. James was gone, lost in a classified operation. As the reality sank in, Sarah made a silent vow to her children and to James's memory. She would ensure that his sacrifice was never forgotten, that his love would continue to guide their family through the darkness of loss and into the light of a new day. 20 years had passed since that fateful day when Sarah's world had shattered. The Anderson home, once filled with the echoes of grief, had slowly transformed into a place of healing and remembrance. Sarah, her hair now streaked with silver, sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her as she stared at an envelope that had arrived that morning. The postmark was faded, the edges worn, but the handwriting was unmistakable. James's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she held the letter, a ghost from the past materializing in the present. Fear and anticipation warred within her. What words from 2 decades ago awaited her? Taking a deep breath, Sarah carefully opened the envelope. As she unfolded the paper, the scent of James, a mix of sea salt and his favorite cologne, wafted up, transporting her back in time. Tears blurred her vision as she began to read. "My beloved Sarah, If you're reading this, then I've fulfilled my duty to our country, but failed in my promise to return to you. I write this knowing each moment could be my last, but hoping against hope that I'll be able to tear up this letter and tell you all this in person. Sarah's tears fell freely now, dotting the paper as James's words painted a vivid picture of his love, his dreams for their children, and his unwavering belief in their future together. He spoke of Ethan's strength, Emma's creativity, and the life they had built, a life he cherished above all else. As she reached the end of the letter, Sarah heard the front door open. Ethan, now a naval officer himself, and Emma, a talented musician, entered the kitchen. They stopped short at the sight of their mother, tears streaming down her face, clutching a letter to her chest. "Mom?" Emma's voice was soft, concerned. Sarah looked up, a mixture of pain and joy on her face. "It's from your father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He wrote us one last letter." The siblings exchanged a glance before moving to their mother's side. As Sarah began to read James's words aloud, his voice seemed to fill the room, bridging the gap of years and loss, reminding them all of the love that had shaped their lives. The discovery of James's letter ignited a spark of curiosity in the Anderson family. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Ethan found himself drawn to the attic, a space that had remained largely untouched since his father's passing. Dust motes danced in the pale light as he rummaged through old boxes, each one a potential treasure trove of memories. His hands fell upon a weathered trunk, its brass fixtures tarnished with age. With a mix of reverence and excitement, Ethan called out, "Mom! Emma! I think I found something." Sarah and Emma hurried up the creaky stairs, their eyes widening at the sight of the trunk. Together, they carefully opened it, revealing a collection of James's personal effects, items that had been returned to them years ago but had been too painful to explore at the time. As they sifted through the contents, each item told a story. A stack of dog-eared photographs revealed moments from James's early days in the Navy, his proud stance at graduation, candid shots with fellow sailors, and quiet moments of reflection on various ships. Emma gasped as she pulled out a faded corsage pressed between the pages of an old notebook. "Mom, is this?" Sarah's eyes misted over. "Your father's prom corsage. He kept it all these years." She recounted the story of their high school dance, how James had been so nervous he'd stepped on her toes 3 times during their first slow dance. Ethan discovered his father's journal, filled with entries that ranged from philosophical musings on leadership to simple observations about the beauty of the sea. One particular entry caught his eye. "Saw a pod of dolphins today. Reminded me of taking Ethan to the aquarium. Must remember to do that again when I get home." The simple sentence hit Ethan hard, a reminder of the future they'd lost. Yet, it also filled him with a sense of connection to the father he'd barely known. As they continued to explore, Emma came across James's old service medals and commendations. Her fingers traced the engravings, a sense of pride and purpose welling up inside her. "I want to follow in Dad's footsteps," she said softly. "I want to serve, to make a difference like he did." Sarah and Ethan looked at her, surprised but understanding. The legacy of James Anderson was alive in his children, shaping their dreams and aspirations in ways they were only beginning to understand. As the afternoon wore on, the attic became a sanctuary of rediscovery. Laughter mingled with tears as they shared stories, pieced together memories, and felt James's presence more strongly than they had in years. The trunk, once a repository of pain, had become a wellspring of healing, bringing the Anderson family closer together and helping them see their past and their future in a new light. The idea for a memorial service to honor James Anderson's life and legacy was born from the rediscovery of his personal effects. As summer turned to fall, the Anderson family threw themselves into the preparations, each detail a labor of love and remembrance. Sarah stood in the backyard, clipboard in hand, directing the setup of chairs and a small stage. The old oak tree, under which James had proposed years ago, would serve as a backdrop for the ceremony. Strings of lights were being hung, twinkling like stars against the deepening twilight. Ethan, home on leave, worked alongside his childhood friend Mike to set up a display of James's photographs and medals. They paused occasionally, Ethan sharing stories about the father he was getting to know through these mementos. Emma, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, sat at a folding table, carefully arranging flowers, blue hydrangeas, James's favorite. Her fingers moved deftly, creating bouquets that would adorn each row of chairs. As the day of the ceremony dawned, guests began to arrive. Old friends from James's Navy days, neighbors who had supported the family through the years, and relatives from across the country gathered in the Andersons' backyard. The ceremony began with Sarah stepping up to the podium, her voice strong despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "James wasn't just a hero in uniform," she began. "He was a hero in our everyday lives, as a husband, a father, a friend." One by one, friends and family members shared their memories. There were stories of James's bravery in combat, but also tales of his infectious laugh, his terrible jokes, and his unwavering loyalty to those he loved. Commander Robert Hayes, James's old friend and colleague, took the stage. "James saved my life more than once," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just in battle, but in the quiet moments when the weight of our duty seemed too much to bear. He had a gift for reminding us why we served, why it mattered." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the gathering, Emma stepped up to the microphone. Her voice, clear and strong, filled the air as she sang "Anchors Aweigh," James's favorite Navy hymn. The melody soared, a fitting tribute to a man who had given his all for his country and his family. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. As candles were lit, their flames flickering in the gathering dusk, there was a sense of peace, of a life well lived, and a legacy that would endure. Later, as the last of the guests departed, Sarah, Ethan, and Emma stood together under the old oak tree. They held each other close, their hearts full of love, grief, and a renewed sense of purpose. James's memory, once a source of pain, had become a wellspring of strength, uniting them in ways they had never expected. The day after the memorial service dawned bright and clear, a new energy pulsing through the Anderson household. The event had stirred up a whirlwind of emotions and memories, leaving the family with a sense of both closure and new beginnings. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his father's journal open before him. He had been up most of the night, poring over the entries, drinking in every word. Now, with the morning sun streaming through the window, he looked up at his mother and sister. "I want to read something," he said, his voice quiet but determined. "Something Dad wrote that I think you both need to hear." Sarah and Emma settled into chairs, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Ethan cleared his throat and began to read. "Today, I watched Ethan build a sandcastle on the beach. He worked so hard, carefully patting each turret into place. When the tide came in and washed it away, I expected tears. Instead, he laughed and started planning an even bigger castle. That's my boy, resilient, determined, always looking forward. I hope he never loses that spirit, no matter what life throws at him." Ethan's voice cracked on the last words. He looked up to see tears in his mother's eyes and a soft smile on Emma's face. "He saw you," Sarah said softly. "He really saw you. Both of you." Emma stood up, her posture straight, reminiscent of her father's military bearing. "I've made a decision," she announced. "What I'm going to apply to the Naval Academy." The room fell silent for a moment before Sarah spoke. "Are you sure, sweetheart? It's not an easy path." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "I'm sure. After yesterday, hearing all those stories about Dad, about the lives he touched and the difference he made, I want to continue that legacy. I want to serve, to protect, to make a difference like he did." Ethan reached out and squeezed his sister's hand. "He would be so proud of you, Em, so proud of both of us." As the morning wore on, the family continued to share stories and memories. The pain of loss was still there, an undercurrent beneath their words, but it was tempered now by a sense of purpose and connection. Sarah watched her children, marveling at the adults they had become. In Ethan's quiet strength and Emma's fierce determination, she saw echoes of James. His legacy lived on, not just in photographs and medals, but in the very fabric of their being. As they made plans for the future, Ethan's upcoming deployment, Emma's academy application, Sarah felt a warmth in her heart. The path ahead would not be easy, but they would face it together, guided by the love and values James had instilled in them all. In the weeks following the memorial service, the Anderson family found themselves navigating a new normal. The house, once a shrine to grief, now buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose and connection. One evening, as Sarah was sorting through the last of the mementos from the service, the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Commander Robert Hayes standing on the porch, a small, weathered box tucked under his arm. "Robert," Sarah said warmly, ushering him in. What a pleasant surprise. They settled in the living room, where Ethan and Emma soon joined them, curious about the unexpected visitor. "I've been holding on to something for a long time," Robert began, his fingers tracing the edges of the box. "Something James asked me to keep safe, just in case." He trailed off, his eyes meeting Sarah's. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box. Inside lay a collection of letters, each addressed to a member of the family, and a small USB drive. "He wrote these during his last deployment," Robert explained. "Said, if anything happened to him, he wanted you all to have them. The drive contains video messages he recorded." The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over them. Sarah picked up a letter with her name on it, her heart racing. "My dearest Sarah," she read aloud, her voice quavering. "If you're reading this, it means I've broken my promise to come home to you. I'm so sorry, my love. Know that every moment away from you and our children was agony, but also know that I died doing what I believed in, protecting the country and the family I love so dearly." As Sarah read, Ethan and Emma leaned into each other, their father's words washing over them, bridging the years of absence. Later that night, after Robert had gone and the initial shock had worn off, the family gathered around the computer to watch James's video messages. His face filled the screen, his eyes twinkling with the same warmth they all remembered. "Hey, champ," he said in Ethan's video. "I hope you're taking care of your mom and sister. Remember, true strength isn't about being tough. It's about being there for the people you love, no matter what." To Emma, James's eyes softened with pride. "My little songbird," he began. "Never stop singing, sweetheart. Your voice has the power to heal hearts and inspire souls. Whatever path you choose in life, let your passion guide you." As the videos played, laughter mingled with tears. James's personality shone through each message, his corny jokes, his words of wisdom, and his boundless love for his family. It was as if he was in the room with them, filling the space with his presence once more. After the last video ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Sarah reached out, pulling Ethan and Emma close. "Your father," she said softly, "was an extraordinary man, and he lives on in both of you." Robert, who had stayed to support the family, cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said, his voice low. "Something James never told anyone but me." The family turned to him, curiosity piqued. "On his last mission," Robert continued, "James uncovered a plot that could have cost thousands of lives. His actions not only saved his team, but prevented a major terrorist attack. He was posthumously awarded the Navy Cross, but the details were classified." This revelation hit the family like a tidal wave. Ethan stood up, pacing the room as he processed this new information about his father. Emma sat in stunned silence, while Sarah closed her eyes, a mix of pride and pain washing over her. "You would know the full extent of his sacrifice. He wanted you to understand why he did what he did, why he couldn't come home." As the night wore on, the family talked, sharing memories and asking Robert questions about James's service. The pain of loss was still there, but it was tempered now by a deeper understanding of James's courage and the impact of his actions. In the early hours of the morning, as Robert prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "James was more than just a fellow officer to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "He was my best friend, my brother in arms, and seeing you all tonight, I know his spirit lives on. He would be so proud of the family you've become." With those words, Robert left, leaving the Andersons to process all they had learned. As the dawn broke, casting a soft light through the windows, Sarah, Ethan, and Emma sat together on the porch swing, drawing strength from each other and from the renewed connection they felt to James. The letters, videos, and revelations had brought James back to them in a way they never expected. His legacy was not just one of heroism and sacrifice, but of enduring love and guidance that would continue to shape their lives for years to come. In the months following the revelations about James's final mission, the Anderson family found themselves navigating a sea of emotions and challenges. The pride they felt in James's heroism was tempered by the renewed grief of understanding the full extent of their loss. Sarah threw herself into her work with a local support group for military families, finding solace in helping others who were walking the path she knew all too well. One evening, as she was preparing materials for a workshop, she came across a photo of James in his dress uniform. The sight of it hit her like a physical blow, and she found herself sinking to the floor, overwhelmed by a fresh wave of grief. It was in this moment of vulnerability that Emma found her. Without a word, the young woman sat beside her mother, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They sat in silence, the strength of their bond speaking volumes. Meanwhile, Ethan was facing his own struggles. At the Naval Academy, where he was now an instructor, he found himself constantly compared to his father. "You're just like Captain Anderson," his colleagues would say, meant as a compliment, but feeling like a weight on his shoulders. One day, after a particularly grueling training exercise, Ethan overheard two cadets talking. "Did you hear about Instructor Anderson's dad? Real hero, saved thousands of lives. Bet Anderson's got some big shoes to fill?" The words echoed in Ethan's mind, fueling a growing sense of inadequacy. That night, he called Emma, pouring out his fears and frustrations. "I feel like I'm living in his shadow," Ethan confessed. "And like nothing I do will ever measure up." Emma listened patiently, then responded with the wisdom beyond her years. "Ethan, Dad's legacy isn't a benchmark for us to meet. It's a foundation for us to build on. We honor him not by trying to be him, but by being the best versions of ourselves." Her words struck a chord in Ethan, helping him see his father's legacy in a new light. Back at home, Sarah was facing financial pressures. James's pension and benefits helped, but with 2 children in college and the house needing repairs, money was tight. She picked up extra shifts at work, often coming home exhausted but determined to keep the family afloat. One rainy afternoon, as Sarah was sorting through bills at the kitchen table, she came across an old envelope. Inside was a letter from James, written years ago but never sent. In it, he spoke of his dreams for their future, of the life they would build together. The last line caught her eye. "No matter what storms we face, my love, we'll weather them together. You're stronger than you know." Sarah traced the words with her finger, feeling a renewed sense of strength. Yes, the waters were choppy, but they were navigating them together, just as James had always believed they could. That evening, when Ethan called home, Sarah shared the letter with him and Emma. As they talked, sharing their struggles and fears, they found comfort in each other and in the enduring spirit of James that lived on in each of them. The challenges they faced were real, but so was the love and resilience that bound them together. The Anderson family found themselves standing at the threshold of new beginnings. The pain of loss had not disappeared, but it had transformed into a driving force, propelling them forward in ways they never expected. On a crisp autumn morning, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by brochures and pamphlets. She looked up as Ethan and Emma entered, their faces curious. "I've been thinking," Sarah began, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "What if we could help other families like ours? Families who've lost loved ones in service." Ethan and Emma exchanged glances, intrigued. Sarah continued, "I want to start a foundation in your father's name, something that can provide support, resources, and maybe even scholarships for children of fallen service members." The idea took root quickly. Emma, with her organizational skills, began researching the legal aspects of setting up a nonprofit. Ethan reached out to his contacts in the Navy, gathering support and ideas for programs they could offer. Within months, the James Anderson Memorial Foundation was born. Their first event, a community picnic for military families, was a resounding success. Sarah found herself surrounded by people sharing stories of their own losses and triumphs, creating a tapestry of shared experiences and hope. As summer approached, the foundation faced its first major challenge. They had the opportunity to sponsor a summer camp for children of fallen soldiers, but the funding was short. The family threw themselves into fundraising efforts, organizing bake sales, car washes, and even a charity run. The night before the deadline, they were still short of their goal. Sitting in the living room, surrounded by tally sheets and donation forms, the family felt the weight of potential failure. "We can't let these kids down," Emma said, her voice determined. Dad wouldn't have given up. Inspired by her words, Ethan had an idea. He reached out to his fellow officers and cadets, sharing the story of the foundation and its mission. The response was overwhelming, and the foundation had gained a network of supporters eager to help in future endeavors. As the first group of children arrived at the camp, Sarah stood with Ethan and Emma, watching the excited faces and hearing the laughter that filled the air. In that moment, she felt James's presence more strongly than ever. "He's here with us," she said softly, squeezing her children's hands. "In every life we touch, in every child we help, James lives on." Ethan nodded, his eyes misting over. Dad always said that service was about more than just wearing a uniform. It was about making a difference in people's lives. Emma smiled, looking out at the children playing. "And that's exactly what we're doing. We're continuing his mission, in our own way." As they walked among the families, sharing stories and offering support, the Andersons realized that they had found a new purpose. James's legacy had become a beacon of hope, not just for their family, but for countless others facing similar journeys of loss and healing. The foundation grew, expanding its programs and reaching more families each year. And with each life they touched, each story they heard, the Andersons felt their connection to James grow stronger. His love, his sacrifice, and his dedication to service lived on through them, a lasting testament to a life well lived and a legacy that would continue to inspire for generations to come. 5 years had passed since the inception of the James Anderson Memorial Foundation, and the impact it had made was beyond anything the family had initially imagined. On a warm summer evening, the Andersons gathered in their backyard. Recently promoted to lieutenant commander, was setting up chairs, while Emma, home on leave from her first tour of duty, arranged flowers on the tables. As the sun began to set, but there were new faces too, including a young woman named Lily, one of the first recipients of the Foundation's college scholarship. As everyone settled in, Sarah called for attention. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice strong and clear. 5 years ago, we started this foundation with a simple goal, to honor James's memory by helping others. Today, as I look around, I see that his legacy has grown beyond our wildest dreams. She went on to share stories of the lives they had touched, children who had found healing at their summer camps. Ethan noticed a man standing at the edge of the gathering, watching intently. There was something familiar about him, but Ethan couldn't quite place it. When Sarah finished her speech, the man approached her, introducing himself as Michael Reeves. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I served with your husband on his last mission. I was there when—" He paused, collecting himself. "When he saved all our lives." A hush fell over the gathering as Michael shared his story. How James had led them through a harrowing situation. How his quick thinking and selfless actions had not only saved their team, but prevented a catastrophic attack. "I've wanted to tell you for years," Michael said, "but the mission was classified. When I heard about this foundation, about all you've done, I knew I had to come. James didn't just save our lives that day. His actions, and now your work, it's like ripples in a pond, touching more lives than you can imagine." As Michael spoke, Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at Ethan and Emma, seeing the pride and emotion in their eyes. James's sacrifice had not been in vain. His love, his courage, his dedication to service, it all lived on, not just in his family but in every life they touched through the foundation. Later that night, as the last of the guests departed, the Anderson family stood together under the old oak tree where they had held James's memorial years ago. The tree had grown, its branches stretching wider, much like the reach of James's legacy. "You know," Emma said softly, "I used to think that losing Dad was the end of our story, but now I see it was just the beginning." Ethan nodded, putting an arm around his sister. "He's still with us, in everything we do, in every life we change." Sarah looked at her children, marveling at the adults they had become. In Ethan's strength and Emma's compassion, in their dedication to service and their commitment to helping others, she saw echoes of James. But she also saw them, unique, but they had emerged stronger, their love for each other and for James binding them together. The story of James Anderson, sailor, hero, husband, and father, had not ended with his sacrifice. Instead, it had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. Through his family and the countless lives they touched, James's spirit lived on, a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of love, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can be found if you have the courage to seek it.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.